factor out the greatest common factor or factor by grouping. So with this problem, what we need to look at each of the different terms and see if they have something in common. So if we start with the coefficient part, 6, 9, 4, and 6, we see that they have nothing in common. And then not all of them have x's and not all of them have y's. So it doesn't mean that we can't factor it any further. There's several methods of factoring this. So the first method is factor by grouping. So we know that they don't all have something in common, but we know that these two factors have something in common, and these two factors have something in common. Sorry, not factors, terms, excuse me. So these two terms have something in common, and these two terms have something in common. So 6y squared and 9y, they have a 3y in common. So if we factor out a 3y, we get 2y plus 3. 3 times 2 is 6, y times y is y squared, and then 3y times 3 gives you the 9y. With the next two terms, we see that they have a 2x in common. So if we factor out a 2x, we get 2y plus 3. 2x times 2y gives you the 4xy, and 2x times 3 gives you the 6x. Now notice with this new problem, we have two terms, and the two terms have a 2y plus 3 in common. So what we can do now is we can factor out that 2y plus 3. So if we factor out the 2y plus 3 from that term, we're left with 3y plus 2x. So here's the 2y here, and this is the 2x there. So the answer for this problem would be 2y plus 3 times 3y plus 2x. The other method of factoring this is to factor by putting them in a box. So we draw a box, and because we have 4 terms, we can use the box. So we put the first term in the first box, so 6y squared, the second term in the second box, 9y, the third term, 4xy, in the third box, and then the last term in the last box, so 6x. Now, we're basically just organizing our work in a different way. So if we look at the first two terms, we want to find out the greatest common factor for the 6y squared and the 9y, and we're going to pull it out. Excuse me. Okay, so if we look at 6y squared and 9y, they have a 3y in common. So we're going to pull out a 3y. Then 3y times what gives you 6y squared. So we need a 2y. 3 times 2 is 6, y times y is y squared. And then 3y times 3 gives you this 9y. And then now that you have this factor here, we have 2y times what is going to give you 4xy. So you can see we're missing a 2x. And then 2x times 3 is equal to the 6x. What I like about the box is that this last box serves as a checker. So it's kind of checking your work. If the last two terms multiply to that box, then you know you've done it right. So the answer to this problem is 3y plus 2x, that comes from here, and then 2y plus 3, that comes from here. So this is just another way of organizing your work. Now you probably look at these two problems and you say, well, they're not the same. This one has a 2y plus 3 first, and this one has it in. Well, the commutative property of multiplication allows me to switch the order and still have the same product. So it's like saying 2 times 3 is the same thing as 3 times 2. So it doesn't matter if I switch the order. So there's just two different ways of factoring out the greatest common factor or factor by grouping.